What would you do if every time you stayed over at your grandmother's house growing up, something in the top bunk above you tried on a different face and asked you if you liked it better? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about someone who says that they were an only child, but there was always something sleeping above her. When I was little, I stayed at my grandmother's house all the time. She had this spare room at the end of the hallway with an old wooden bunk bed in it. I always slept in the bottom bunk. I was an only child and nobody ever slept on the top. At first, I liked that room. During the day, it felt normal, but at night, it changed. The first time it happened, I was 7. I was lying in bed, almost asleep, when I heard the mattress above me shift. Not the frame creaking. I mean actual weight moving around on the top bunk like somebody had rolled over. I called for my grandma and she came in, turned the lamp on, and of course, there was nobody there. She told me old beds make sounds at night. But then it happened again a few months later. This time I heard breathing above me first, slow and wet, and then something lowered over the edge of the top bunk. At first, I thought it was a woman's face, but the longer I looked at it, the less human it seemed. The eyes were too open, the mouth hung wrong, and the skin looked too still. It looked at me and whispered, "Don't fall asleep yet." And then it screamed. Nobody else ever heard that scream. That was the worst part. My grandma would come running in every time, but the room was empty, and I would be the only one shaking and crying because the sound felt like it had gone straight through my skull. And every time I stayed there after that, it had a different face. That's what made it so much worse. One night it looked like an old man with tiny teeth and wet lips. And one night it looked like a little girl, except her eyes looked too old for her face. And one night it had lipstick smeared too far past the mouth and smiled before the rest of the face caught up. It always started the same. The top bunk would shift, and then a face would lower into the view upside down. And then it would whisper, "Don't fall asleep yet." Sometimes it would ask me things too. "How do you like this one? Do you want a prettier one? You didn't like the last one." And then the scream would come. The worst face I ever saw was when I was 10. That night I woke up and saw fingers first. They were long and pale fingers curling over the edge of the top bunk. And then a face lowered down, upside down. Its mouth was already open. It had long, sharp teeth, and way too many of them. And blood was running up the face because the head was upside down. Thin, dark lines from the mouth into the hairline, and the eyes were huge, completely black. It smiled wider and whispered, "Is this face better?" And then it screamed so hard, I rolled out of bed and hit the floor. The worst night of all came years later when I was 14. I woke up and the top bunk was empty. For 1 second, I felt relieved. And then I looked towards the corner of the room. There was this tall figure standing there, bent wrong and too thin, arms too long, and just standing in the corner watching me. And then it moved fast. It turned and crawled up the bunk bed ladder so quickly it barely made a sound. The top mattress took weight right after, hard enough to shake the whole frame. And then a new face lowered down over the edge and whispered, "Look at me before I scream." That was the last night I ever slept in that room. Years later, after my grandma died, my mom and I had to clean the house out. When the men helping us moved the bunk bed, they found things hidden under the top mattress. Hair and little buttons, a child's barrette, and 3 yellow teeth, tiny cutout school pictures with the faces scratched away. We got rid of that bed the same day, but every once in a while, if I'm tired enough, I still wake up in the middle of the night already knowing what I'm about to hear. The mattress above me shifting. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
Use the bathroom at the park, and I'm not talking about the porta potties. I'm talking about the building that they actually have built that says bathrooms. And if you ever walked into the bathroom, you notice it's either extremely dark or extremely cold or extremely dirty. It's either one of those three or all three. Next story that I will be changing people's names for privacy reasons, it makes you feel like you just want to hold it until you get home. But after breaking up with her boyfriend, she just focused completely on her mental health. She signed up for a therapist. She focused on working out. She focused on making sure she was eating healthy and clean. And she decided to, every other day, go to the track at the park and just run a couple laps and then go home. But after her fourth lap, she decided she needed to use the bathroom. And as she's making her way to the bathroom, she can hear somebody call her name. And when she looks behind her, there's nobody there. And that's when she realizes she's the only person at the park, and she's the only car in the parking lot. So she found that very odd that she heard her name, but she assumed that maybe it was the wind, maybe the cars passing by, maybe that's what she heard and it was really not her name. Now, if you're the only car in the parking lot and there's nobody at the park, I'm not using that bathroom. But she did. Says that the bathroom was as usually as expected. It was dark, cold, and very dirty. So she tried to do her business as fast as possible, and that's when she heard the door open. She didn't think much of it. She thought maybe someone needed to use the bathroom as well, and they were just going to do their business, and she was going to do hers and move on with her life. But that was until she heard someone knock on her bathroom stall door. The public bathrooms are made out of stainless steel doors, where you can see on the other side of the door through the cracks. You can see the mirror on the wall. You can see the sink usually. You can look into somebody else's stall. It all depends on the width and size of the door, but usually the standard size is between 28 inches wide, 26 inches wide, to 58 inches long, to 60 inches long. It depends on basically what kind of door it is, what kind of bathroom you're in, but usually they're made out of stainless steel, and you can see on the other side. Now, Sarah says all she could see was darkness on the other side. It was darker than the bathroom itself, so she knew whoever it was, they were standing in the way where she couldn't see who it was. She begins to ask, like, can I help you? Can I help you? And no answer. And that's when she heard her name being called on the other side of the door. And it kind of freaked her out, because how is it possible that this person knows her name? She was alone at the park. Well, as she thought, she was alone at the park, and no one knew she was there. So she's trying to figure herself out as to who this person is, and they begin to laugh, and it starts echoing in the bathroom, this person's laugh over and over and over again. And Sarah's just getting chills up and down her spine. She feels like the room just temperature just plummeted even further. She couldn't even gather herself to open up the door. Why? Because the door usually opens towards you, so you're letting the person in instead of out. So the door she can't open. She can't open it because she's letting the person in. So she's just sitting there on top of the toilet, holding her legs up, just praying that the person will eventually stop tormenting her and leave. Now, as she's sitting there listening to the laugh get deeper and deeper and deeper, she realizes that whoever this is has no feet. No feet whatsoever. There's no feet at all from where she can see sitting on the bathroom toilet. There's no feet. But she could see the black figure, but there's no feet. So she's just praying that whatever this is doesn't decide to come underneath the bathroom stall door and try to terrorize her even further, because at this point, she's a rat in a corner and there's a cat on the other side of that door. That's how she took it. It felt like an eternity as this person just kept laughing and laughing and laughing until it completely stopped when the door opened. And that's when somebody walked in, and Sarah was able to see through the cracks of the door. It was no longer dark. She was able to see the mirror. She was able to see the sink, and she opened the door. And that's when she saw a girl walking into the bathroom. And as she's walking out of the stall, Sarah's shaking. The girl asks her, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Did you see somebody leave, or did you see somebody else go into another stall?" And the girl said, "No, there's nobody here, just me and you that I can tell." And Sarah says, "Okay." And as she's shaking, walking towards the sink to wash her hands, the girl turns to her and says, "Do you mind waiting for me and not leaving? I don't want to stay here in the bathroom by myself. It's dark outside and there's a lot of creeps out here. And with you saying that you felt like somebody was in here with you, I don't want to be left alone." And that's when Sarah told the girl, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll wait for you right here." The girl used the bathroom. They both started walking out the bathroom. And as they're both walking out the bathroom, they heard all the doors just slam shut in the bathroom stalls. Now, what do you guys think that was? And I wouldn't be using any public bathrooms after dark. Not me.
This happened in a really small town in Michoacan. This guy says from a very young age he loved anything paranormal, horror, he was really into the occult. And because of this, he says that sometimes he would experience things that other people didn't experience. When he was 9 years old, his dad took this trip into Mexico City for this march and he was gonna come back that same night. At home was his mom, him, and his little sister, and they all stayed awake because they wanted to greet the dad when he got home. They had stayed up very late. It was around 1 or 2 in the morning, and the mom noticed that the dad wasn't coming, so she told them to go to sleep and that she would wake them up when he got there. Boo! I'm out of the TV, okay? Should I go back in? Basically, his sister was a scaredy cat and she didn't want to go lay down in her room by herself, so she asked him if she can go into his room and sleep with him, and he agreed, being the good older brother that he was. So they go to his bedroom and they lay down, and when everything just went very silent is when they started to hear like a woman screaming from far away. He was about to ask what that was, and that's when his little sister shut him up and she said, "Do you hear that? People say that that's La Llorona." I would be like, "Get the fuck out of my room. You're scaring me more than the fucking Llorona outside." She then tells him, "When you hear her from far away, it's because she's close by. And if you hear her close by, it's because she's far away." That's when the little sister says, "That means that she's close." And she couldn't even finish the sentence, because in that moment, their 2 pet dogs that were outside started barking and growling very aggressively. The dogs also started jumping like towards the front door of the house because they could hear it. And that's also when, instead of hearing that woman crying out loud from far away, they now heard this woman crying from very close by. The screams and crying were so loud it almost felt like it was shaking the house, and that it left him paralyzed, like he couldn't move. He was so scared. The next thing he knew, his mom was coming into his bedroom, grabs him and his sister. She tells them, "We're gonna sleep in my room tonight, and whatever happens, do not let go of me. Let's just stay really close to each other." She then tells them to close their eyes and to start praying. He explains how him and his sister started praying. They closed their eyes and they just listened to the mom without questioning anything. And he's like, "I don't know if anybody who's listening to this has ever heard La Llorona. Even if she's screaming, crying for like a minute, it feels like hours to you." It was like the 5th time that she had screamed really loud, like she was crying. And in that moment is when he felt the front door of the house just shake very violently. It was almost as if she was trying to come into their house. By this point, he's crying, the sister's crying, and they're holding on to their mom really tight, and she's still praying. He explains that when she was at the end of the prayer is when everything just stopped completely. At some point, they ended up falling asleep, and in the morning, they wake up and they're having breakfast with the mom in the kitchen, and that is also the moment when their dad finally shows up with his aunt. The moment that the aunt sat down at the kitchen table with them is when she asked them, "Did you guys also hear La Llorona last night?" The aunt then tells them, "I was so scared because I thought she was gonna come into my house, but from what I heard, they say that if La Llorona tries to enter your house or just stays there for a long time, it's because something bad is going to happen." Now, he doesn't know if this was a coincidence or not, but 8 days after this situation happened with La Llorona, his uncle ended up passing away. He explains how his uncle was already really sick and that he had diabetes. He does say that after this, they would continue to hear La Llorona from time to time, but she never stopped or tried to open their door again after this. Today, he is 31 years old, and this story, they continue to tell people over and over again, him, his sister, and his mom, because it was very much real.
An email from someone named Jessie who says she encountered what she believes to be a mimic in the woods. Of course it's the woods. Why wouldn't it be the woods? It's always the woods. But the woods in question is actually a well-known park in the area where she lives, which is a rural Midwest town. She says there are volleyball courts, there's multiple trails for hiking and mountain biking. There's even soccer and rugby courts. So it's not like this place is desolate by any means. And during the day, you can often find many people there. But on one particular night, she and a group of friends decided to go to this park to watch a meteor shower. With 3 friends: Chris, the guy that she's closest to, who she's known well over 10 years and says she trusts with her life, and then 2 other guys named Brian and Peter. 4 of them took the main path into the heart of the park to get to a field where they could lay down and watch the meteor shower. When the meteor shower ended, the 4 of them were still just kind of hanging out and having a good time when Chris asked her if he could talk to her privately about something, and they took a separate path that looped kind of around the main area where they were laying in. It's important to note that both she and Chris had been to the park many times, both together and separately, and both of them felt like they knew the park and the trails like the back of their hand. As they started down the trail into the wooded area of the park, they could hear movement from the woods to their right, and Chris suddenly grabbed her wrist, motioned to his ear as if to say, "Listen," and they both stood still and stopped walking, and the movement that they heard seemed to stop as well. Pair began walking again, but the movement picked up as they started walking as well, and Chris stopped again. And she said this scared her because Chris is normally a very calm and Outwardly peaceful person. He's not someone that is often freaked out. So his reaction startled her, but she could make out that there was definitely something moving in the woods to their right. They couldn't see anything. Both of them assumed that what they were hearing must be a deer or a small animal moving along the forest floor. They kept talking as what they were discussing was a serious matter and got further deeper into the woods. And at one point in the conversation, Jessie says she was just overtaken by this sensation of fear. She had the distinct feeling that someone or something was watching her. And she said she told herself that she was just getting in her head and it was just dark out and she had just never been out here that late before. She didn't want to seem silly in front of Chris though, and so she didn't say anything, but would later find out that he had that same sensation of being watched and didn't say anything out of fear of freaking her out. Eventually they came up to a T in the trail and they needed to make a right in order to get back to where their friends were. They reached the T in the trail, though. She says that they all of a sudden felt very cold. It was a very drastic change to the otherwise warm, balmy spring air that they had experienced all up until that point. And she had the sensation of being watched and was filled with fear, but didn't want to say anything to Chris. And he apparently also had that feeling, though he didn't say anything to her, not wanting to scare her. So instead, he just urged her back toward the field from which they came. As they came up to the point in the park where they had left their friends, they realized their friends were nowhere in sight, and it was at that moment that they heard their friends' voices from behind them on the trail. He says that both Brian and Peter have incredibly distinct voices, and so when they heard their voices talking to each other on the trail, they knew it was them, and Chris suggested that they sneak back and scare them. Chris suggested this. Jessie immediately felt better because it turned her fear into a fun activity. And she was like, yeah, I'm down, let's go. So they start sneaking back through the trail to find the source of the voices. But they're walking, and after like 10 minutes pass, they realize that the voices are changing locations and they're going from one side of the trail to the other. Even though they couldn't see Brian and Peter, they knew that they must be just out of reach. But after continuing to get further and further into the forest, they got confused and they were like, how are their voices coming from both directions without them cutting across the trail in front of us? She says they weren't able to make out the context of the conversation that Brian and Peter were having either. It was like they were just out of earshot to be able to discern that it was their voices without actually being able to understand them. But finally, after both getting frustrated, they feel like they have finally caught up with them. And Chris is like, they're right on the other side of this tree. Whispering, he's like, let's both pop out on opposite sides of the tree and we'll both scare them at the same time. And she's like, okay, deal. And as they're about to do it, she feels her phone buzzing in her pocket and she takes out her phone and she can see that Peter is calling her. She can still hear Peter and Brian talking on the opposite sides of the tree, and they've lowered their voices to a whisper, and so she's very confused, and she answers the phone, and she can hear Peter's voice, and he's got music blaring in the background. He's like, hey, where are you? We're already back in Brian's car. We're waiting on you guys. He asked him if he was being serious, and he said, yeah, we went back to the car like 30 minutes ago. We've been waiting on you, but we didn't know where you went. And she puts the phone on speaker, and she can hear both their voices through the phone and on the other side of the tree. Voices were having two different conversations. And so Chris peeks around the tree and there's nobody there, but they can still hear the voices from somewhere in the woods. And Chris says, okay, if you're really in the car, blare the horn. And they do. He and Chris heard the car horn go off both through the phone and about a mile off in the distance. Hung up the phone and started booking it back to the car. And as they were headed back down the path, they thought they heard movement behind them on the trail, and Jessie whirled around and she said she swore she saw a dark figure come out of the woods and seemed to speed up as if it was chasing them, but she said she couldn't be sure it wasn't a shadow. As they approached the car, though, both of them heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the woods behind us. She said, I don't know if it was man, woman, or animal, but it was something. Said that she and Chris haven't talked about it much since it happened because neither of them can find a reasonable explanation, but they both know that there was something in the woods that night that was only audible to them. What are we thinking? Teenagers playing a prank? Mimics? Let me know what you think mimics are. I'm deeply intrigued by this topic, but I'm very green as to who or what they are and what they want. Spooky Scary Storytime, the series where we share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unsettling things they've ever experienced. If you have a story you think nobody would believe, send it in. We would love to hear it.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, don't eat too much, because you gotta stay fine. Become one, bestie. It's... Oh yeah. Hi, bestie. I missed you. You know it's time to take a break, right? So go get your snack and go get your gardening essentials, all right? Okay, I just dropped a new YouTube compilation today. So if you want to watch my story times in long form, make sure you go check that out. Don't watch nobody else's because they making money off of me, okay? So for the sake of the story, let's call this guy Jared. This is the story that happened when Jared was back in his home country. So Jared was probably about like 15 years old when this happened. But when he, damn, I'm sorry, y'all. I slept on my shoulder and now I can't lift this arm and I be forgetting. So when he was about 15 years old, his grandmother passed away. Now his grandma was a pretty successful woman, you know. His grandma had 8 kids, which all of them, grew up, had different families. And his grandma owned a lot of land, a lot of animals. Again, she was pretty successful. So when she passed away, there was a lot of things to be split. Mind you, she had 8 kids, right? Now, grandma, before she passed away, because she was sick and she knew that that time was coming, she decided that she was going to give all the land to Jared's father. And she made that very clear. She had the whole family come together and told everyone who would get what, And everybody agreed, or so they thought. But as soon as grandma passed away, some people wanted to claim more things that they were supposed to get. And of course, almost everybody wanted a piece of land. But the piece of land was supposed to go to Jared's dad. Now, Jared's dad is a pretty successful man himself. And so everybody felt like because he's already successful, he shouldn't even be having the land. But Jared is the only person out of his siblings to make something of himself. Everybody else just wanted to be given things, Hence why grandma chose Jared to have all the land. Boom, grandma passes away, they have the funeral, everything goes well. Until it doesn't, because now siblings wanted to start fights with Jared's dad because they wanted that land. But Jared's dad is like, bro, no, grandma gave this to me and I'm the only one of us that's actually working. I went to school, I stayed in school, I graduated, I have a great career. All you guys are doing is making babies. So he stood on business. He was like, no, y'all are not gonna have this land. And ooh, did they not like that. So of course they resorted to magic. So the first thing that happened was one day Jared and his wife, they were driving. They were actually on the way to pick up Jared from school. And so as they're driving, everything is going normal, right? All of a sudden, Jared, who was driving, Jared wasn't driving. Jared's dad was driving. He all of a sudden looked like he's seen a ghost. He starts screaming and swerves the car, which ended up in them getting into a really bad car accident. The car rolled about 5 times. Both survived. However, the wife had to recover for a really long time. But from Jared's dad, let's give him a name. Let's call him Steven. So Steven, from his perspective, he's driving, right? And all of a sudden, there's this truck driving right towards him at full speeds. So he tries to swerve out the way and not hit the truck, which then ended up in the accident. From Steven's wife's point of view, there was no truck. There was nothing in front of them. Only Steven saw that truck. And so when the wife ended up, after the whole accident and stuff, and they ended up talking about it, Steven Steven told her what he saw, and she told him nothing was there. And so now they kind of already understood what was going on, right? They're like, oh, okay, this is all over this land. So they decided to go to somebody to get some protection put on them. And so when they got to the person to put a protection on them, the person told them, you don't even need it. I could really take your money right now and do some fake protection, but honestly, your grandma already had you. She already figured that the kids was gonna do that. She already, before she passed away, made sure that you guys would be protected. Steven is like, okay. This kind of already confirms that y'all really trying to take me out. If grandma had to put protection on me, she's already knowing. But y'all, my siblings, I never expected this from y'all. So boom, the second thing that happened. Now we're back to Jared. For about 3 whole months, Jared started hearing voices. And those voices will tell him to do very, very bad things. At first, it started off small, jump off the chair. Take a couple dollars out of dad's wallet. At first, Jared just thought, these were intrusive thoughts. Sometimes he would give in to them, sometimes he wouldn't. However, they were getting darker and darker and darker. Now, at the time, Jared knew what was going on within the family, but he didn't know too much, so he didn't really relate that to what was going on. Until one night, and of course, it's 3 a.m, Jared wakes up, and the voices have now turned into a figure. And the figure, he could see the figure. And the figure is telling him to go harm his parents. And when I mean harm, I mean unalive. So he's like, no, I don't want to harm my parents. And the voices start telling him that, well, your parents are going to harm you. They're actually planning on taking you out, so you should get them first. Now, Jared does not believe this, but there is a small part of him that he feels like he has no control over that wants to go do it. And so that worries him. So he starts crying and he runs to his parents' room in tears, and he finally tells them about the voices. And now the voice turned into a figure, and how he's been stealing out of their wallet and stuff like that, and it's all because of the voices. So that same night, they called the person that they went to the first time for the protection. And they told the person what was going on. And they were like, yo, I thought you told us that grandma had us. Like, but now Jared is like, he's hearing voices and the voices are telling him to unalive us. And the person told them, you still have nothing to worry about because Jared came to you and told you, right? Usually, the way that it goes is one night he would have just woke up and took y'all out and y'all would have never knew. They're like, but what can we do? Because he feels like it's getting worse. The guy's like, hey, you can bring him right now. Like, I'll work something on him, but trust me, you guys are good. But to relieve you guys, bring him right now. And so that same night, they pack up the car, they go over to the man's house. I'm not gonna give any details because y'all like to try stuff, but basically he cleanses Jared and all of that. And of course, after that night, voices are gone, everything's fine. Everything's fine until the next morning. Steven gets a phone call from 2 of his siblings cussing him out. Just cussing him out. And they're cussing him out about nothing. So he's already knowing y'all mad because what y'all trying is not working. In the midst of all of this, Steven had been working on moving his family abroad because of all of this that was going on. And of course, he didn't tell a soul. He didn't even tell his own family he was working on that. He had already filed for them and everything with his business, but his job. So over like the next month, a lot was happening. Like they were getting constantly attacked, but none of it was working. It was like they were getting attacked and it was like bouncing off of them, which pisses them off even more. And so they decided ultimately they're just going to do the work themselves. They just have to do it themselves because they're trying magic, but that's not working. So they got to take them out themselves. Boom. Steven had already told some of his coworkers at work about what was going on and stuff. And, his job was helping him with moving abroad. So he spoke to some of his closest coworkers and say, hey, when me and my family leave, please watch over our house and that land. I give you full permission to bring the police, whatever it is that you need to do. So there's a date that's finalized. Tickets are booked. They're moving abroad. And he doesn't tell them until 2 days before they move abroad, meaning like his family. So he tells Jared and his wife that in 2 days from now, we're leaving. They're super happy because quite frankly, they're sick of all of this. So the date comes, they travel. They make it to the United States, safe and sound. But as soon as he touches down, he gets off that plane and he finally gets signals. He sees a whole lot of missed calls from his coworker that, he trusted to check on his house and stuff like that. He calls him back. And come to find out, the day that they traveled was the day they were supposed to be taken out. Because the coworker who took them to the airport, after he dropped them off, something told him to go back to the house and, check on the house or whatever. He doesn't know, but something is telling him to do it. So he goes back to check on the house only to see his siblings outside with machetes, with batons, ready to take that entire family out. His own siblings. So they know the coworker. So when they saw the coworker, they tried to play it off and say that, the family stole from them and stuff like that. And the coworker just played along like, oh my gosh, they did that. I can't believe they would do such things like that. They seem like such good people. I'm almost reaching the 10-minute limit, so I'm gonna try to make it fast. The siblings ask him is he at work? Where can we find him? And so he drops the news and tells them, actually, I just took them to the airport. They went to the United States. They didn't tell you guys? And I tell you, they look like they seen a ghost. Not only that, they were so mad. Fumes was coming out of their ears. After they moved, Jared didn't hear too much about it, except those siblings started passing away one by one every year. Okay, time's up. Let me know what you ate. Go to my YouTube. I love you.
The way I would have freaked out had this happened to me. I used to like camping, but now I'm not so sure. So this man, we're going to call him Jeff for the story, and his dad were avid campers. They didn't claim to be professional by any means, but they just really loved being in the great outdoors. They typically would go camping in the eastern and western Sierras. There were great spots near lakes and awesome trails. So last summer, they decided to go for a 2-night stay and do some hiking. The campground was pretty full, but it wasn't unusual for summer, and they ended up getting lucky and finding a site that was pretty secluded. Well, I mean, they thought they were lucky at the time. So the first night was great. It was completely normal. They said there was a little bit of bear activity, but that was not uncommon. So everything was good. Okay, but the second night, they climbed into their tiny little backpacking tents, you know, the kind where your head is like touching the one end and your feet are right up against the other. And they fall asleep pretty quickly until about 3 a.m. when Jeff wakes up to the sound of footsteps kind of milling around his tent. Now, Jeff makes note that his dad is a diabetic and he is notorious for getting up in the middle of the night multiple times to use the bathroom. So at first, Jeff wasn't too alarmed, but then very quickly, he realizes something is very wrong because their campsite was pretty close to a bathroom, and the footstep sounds, if it were his father, would have been going in the direction of the bathroom, but they weren't. These footsteps were sort of circling around Jeff's tent. Now, Jeff is laying there listening carefully, trying to convince himself that it's gotta just be his dad. I'm sure it's just that he couldn't make his way back in the dark or something from being at the bathrooms already. But then the footsteps stop about a yard away from Jeff's tent, and then the heavy breathing kicks in. So this breathing persists for a few minutes, and Jeff just keeps on telling himself, nope, it's gotta be my dad. And eventually the breathing does stop and Jeff falls back asleep, which I don't know that I could have done that. Okay, so guys, Jeff wakes up again a little while later to the sound of the breathing again, but this time it was coming from directly above the tent. And then a rush of terror jumps up Jeff's spine, and he knows without a doubt this is not his dad. So Jeff is laying perfectly still, trying not to move. And he said that the rainfly that was on the tent was preventing him from seeing what it was through the roof. He mentions it was a new moon, so it was like pitch black outside. No, of course it was. So whatever this was continued to go around and around Jeff's tent. And Jeff continues to lay there, utterly terrified, not moving a muscle. And guys, he says, all of a sudden, a single finger runs up the length of his foot from the heel up to his toes, pushing onto his foot through the wall of the freaking tent. He said it was really slow, almost methodical. And at first he's thinking, this has to be like some kind of dream. My foot is in my sleeping bag. But then he very quickly realizes after shuffling a bit that no, his foot was outside of that sleeping bag, very much exposed and directly up against the wall of the tent. So Jeff is freaking laying there, guys. And this thing is just stroking his foot, okay? And then he said the breathing intensified, and then it just sort of hovered over the tent, which seemed like forever. And then just like that, it was gone. Jeff lay there awake the rest of the night until the sun came up and he heard his father outside of the tent. So Jeff jumps out and he starts to talk to his father, and he's asking him if he got out of the tent at all last night. And the father asked him the same thing, and they're both sharing their stories. And Jeff's dad said that at 2 a.m, he heard something or someone outside of their tents, and he thought that someone was kind of rummaging and going through their things. But Jeff's dad thought he should probably not go out and investigate. He felt that it was unsafe. So he ended up going back to bed and not looking out either. And then they both look over at the picnic table, and every piece of their equipment and gear had been perfectly laid out onto the table. And nothing was missing or stolen. It was just deliberately organized in little piles. And then upon further inspection, there were footprints in the dirt all around Jeff's tent. Jeff says that they still bring it up sometimes and they cannot help but get skeeved out about it. Yeah, I would imagine so. Ugh, gross. All right, guys, drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you ever go camping again after that? Has anything creepy like that ever happened to you out in the woods or at a campground? I will say I go camping a lot, and there might be little weird noises in the night, but I have never experienced something like that before. I mean, not that I'm asking for it or anything. All right, and if you have a creepy story of your own, you gotta share it. And if you're new here, follow for more creepy story time.
Boy who came upstairs twice. Hi everyone, welcome back to Candlelit Whispers with Amanda. Today we have an interesting story about a doppelganger, but you let me know what you think about this story in the comments below. Back in 2007, I was sitting on my couch playing Guitar Hero 3 on my PlayStation 2. I was maybe 12. From where I was sitting, I could see the basement door, part of the dining room, and part of the staircase leading upstairs. My older brother was downstairs with a few of his friends. Just normal teenage stuff. I'm focused on the game when the basement door slowly opens. One of my brother's friends steps out. Tony. He just stood there, blank expression. Didn't say a word. He just stared at me for a few seconds. Then he turned, walked through the dining room, and went upstairs. Our only bathroom was on the second floor, so I didn't think much about it. A few minutes pass, and the basement door opens again. And it's Tony. Again. This time he's smiling, like weirdly cheerful. He looks at my screen and says, "I'm pretty good at playing Guitar Hero with the PlayStation controller." Then he walks to the dining room, goes upstairs again. Then my stomach dropped, because I never saw him come back downstairs the first time. I was facing the staircase the whole time. There was no way he passed me. I just sat there frozen, trying to make sense of it. Then a minute later, I hear footsteps coming down the stairs. Tony. He smiles at me and says, "You know, you can come hang out with us anytime." Then he walks to the basement door, opens it, goes back downstairs, and I waited for maybe 10 seconds before I ran to the basement door to open it. My brother and all of his friends were down there, including Tony, sitting cross-legged on the floor and playing cards. I asked him why he kept going upstairs. He looked confused and said, "I've been down here the whole time, but I know what I saw, and I still can't explain it." I still can't explain how Tony came upstairs twice before going downstairs once. What did I see, or who did I see? Wow. I really think this might be like a time, also maybe like a time slip. Maybe he did come, but it was like a different time. It wasn't the time they were all downstairs. Also, it could have been like a glitch. We're all in this matrix. It could have been a glitch. But you let me know what you think about this story in the comments below.
It's been 2 years since the Miami Mall incident, and we still to this day have no idea what happened. Now, on New Year's Day 2024, there was this breaking story that there was this huge police presence at the Bayside Mall in Miami, Florida. And the initial story was that there was this huge teen takeover. But there were many witnesses who came forward and said, no, that's not what happened. There were these 10 to 15 tall, dark, black-colored, shadow-like entities that were running around the mall. Now, what's interesting about the Bayside Mall is it's actually called the Bayside Marketplace because it is an open-air market. Like, it is outside, and it's also right next to the ocean. So if something wanted to, it could swim right up and come into this place. Now, there was an individual who came forward that I was able to speak to when all of this happened. He said he was inside the mall before this all went down, and he was getting his daughter a birthday present. Well, he said probably about 20-30 minutes before everything started happening, he got this very bad migraine. And it was just like this pulsating pain in the front of his head. And he said it was so bad that he had to go to the food court and get some water. So as he's sitting at the food court, he said he just remembered people started panicking. And there were people running and screaming. And he could hear these strange, unhumanly like sounds. And he said out of the corner of his eye, he sees this very tall, skinny, shadowy figure, and it was moving along the wall. And he said he seen this thing turn, and it started scanning and kind of looking at all the people running around. And it looked like it had a double set of eyes. And he said that's when he proceeded to take off running towards the nearest exit and get out of there. As he was leaving, he said there were just multiple helicopters flying around. And there were people just panicking, crying, screaming. He'd never seen anything like that before. And he said these creatures, these things that he's seen, just did not make sense. So what do you think happened that day at the Miami Mall? Have you ever had stuff just randomly disappear from your house? Like one day you discover that something is missing, and for years you look for it, but then one day it mysteriously appears. Believe it or not, this is quite common amongst people. But could there be something supernatural to that? Now, cultures across the world all spoke of these trickster type spirits that were known for playing tricks on people. They would often come into people's homes at night and move around stuff, take stuff. And you ask, why would they do this? Because this creates fear, this creates confusion, and this creates anger. All of things which negative entities feed on. So if they take an object from your home and they move it or they hide it and you can't find it, you get freaked out, you get angry, and often it can cause division in the home amongst people. Now, the Native Americans, right, they have these stories of animals being these trickster type spirits. In European culture, they call them goblins and fairies. But these things are very much real. Now, there was this guy named Marcus. Marcus and his mom lived in Tampa Bay, Florida. And he said one day he was in his bedroom and he had this big cabinet. And on the top shelf, he kept this ring. This ring was special to him because his father gave it to him before he passed away. So he would often take the ring out and he would put it on because it reminded him of him. And when he was done with the ring, he would put it on that top shelf every time. But he said one day he went to go and grab the ring and it wasn't there. So he started frantically searching his entire room and he can't find this thing. So he goes out the room and he goes to his mother's room and he says, Mom, like, did you take Dad's ring? Like, what did you do with it? She says, I did not touch your dad's ring. Like, I haven't been in your bedroom. So they search the entire house. They cannot find this ring anywhere. Couple weeks later, his mom comes running into his room. And she's like, okay, Marcus, what did you do with my favorite dress? And he goes, what are you talking about? And she goes, I know that you've taken my dress and hidden it somewhere or done something with it because you were mad at me about the ring. And he goes, Mom, like, I didn't take your dress. And she goes, okay, whatever. Over the next few months, they start noticing more and more things go missing around their house. And it was getting to the point where Marcus would be brushing his hair. He would set down his comb, and then it was gone. And he could not find these items anywhere. So one day he has a talk with his friend who was very superstitious. And she tells him, you know, sometimes spirits take these objects and these items from our homes. Why don't you call out alone in your bedroom and ask the spirit to return this item? So he goes home and he goes into his bedroom and he says, you know, hey, could you please return my father's ring? Like, it means a lot to me. That night, he goes to bed, and when he wakes up in the morning, he gets up out of the bed, and he finds this ring on the ground right next to the bed. Now, he had searched this area hundreds of times, and somehow the ring just appeared there. So he figured, maybe I just misplaced it and I didn't realize it. Well, this continued to happen where things would just randomly disappear from the home. One night he's in his bedroom and he's asleep. And he said he heard some sound from out in the living room. So he gets up out of bed, he walks down the hallway, and when he comes into the living room, he sees his mom laying on the couch. But standing over the top of her, he sees this shadowy figure trying to take off her earring. And this figure turns, it looks at Marcus, and it just disappears. And it was at that point he knew that something, some sort of spirit, was taking the items from his house. Have you ever had a dream and then that dream came true? Now, there was this man named Cal. Cal was from Connecticut, and he said one weekend him and his family went on this camping trip. They were staying in their family's RV. Well, he said the first night they were there, they were all asleep. When they awoke to their father screaming. And so Cal runs over to his father, and he could see that he's visibly shaken by something. He's, has these tears running down his face. So he says, Father, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? He says, Dad said, I had this dream. And in this dream, there was this big flood. And there were people drowning all around me. And they were calling out for help. And I couldn't save them. I couldn't do anything. And he said, it felt so real that I didn't think it was a dream. And so Cal's like, well, were those people in your dream? Like, were they me and the family? He said, no, they looked Asian, like they were from somewhere in Asia. So he comforts his dad and he tells him, it's probably just a dream. So they all go back to bed. Well, in the morning, his dad just couldn't shake that dream. And he said, I want to turn on the news. So they turn on the news station. And sure enough, they see on the news that giant tsunami that had hit Indonesia that day. And as he's watching them show pictures and scenes of what had happened, he recognized this place from his dreams. He said, I was there. I seen the people drowning in the water. And Cal knew that he must have had some sort of intuition about what was going to happen. Now, there was this other story of this woman from Los Angeles, Vivian. She said one night she was in bed and she just remembered having this really weird dream. She said she was walking around this big city. She said there were these big buildings and it looked like it was Japan. There was Japanese writing all over these buildings. She said in the middle of the city, she sees this little girl and she's crying. And she walked up to the little girl and she said the little girl started to say to her, I've lost my mommy and I've lost my daddy. They've drowned in the water. Like, can you help me? Can you help me save them? And she said the next thing she knows, she woke up. But her bed was completely saturated in water. It wasn't from her. The ceiling, the walls, nothing was leaking. But somehow her bed was filled full of water. And she said that day she went to work and all of a sudden on the news, they started to talk about the tsunami that had hit Japan. And it made her feel like she had some sort of vision as to what was going to happen. Do you believe in the Jersey Devil? Now, this is probably America's oldest legend. It traces its roots to a place now known as Leeds Point, New Jersey. And in 1735, there was a woman named Jane Leeds. Now, Jane Leeds was known around the community as being a witch and an occultist, and so she was shunned. It's said that she had 12 children, and she became pregnant with the 13th child. Now, in her small little cabin, as she's giving birth, she yells out, "Let this child be a devil." And she gives birth to this baby boy. The baby is then passed to the father, and it's said that the fireplace glowed an eerie red color, and this baby transformed into this devilish looking creature, half horse, half bat. And in some variations, it's said that it attacked the midwife and even the father, and then took off out the chimney into the Pine Barrens. And still to this day, people report seeing what they call the Jersey Devil, or the Leeds Devil. Now, this is a story that comes out of the Wharton State Forest. There was this man named Jim. Jim was an avid outdoorsman and hiker, and he said he went to a visit to the Wharton State Forest to go for a hike. Now, he finds this trail and he starts hiking. He was probably 4 or 5 miles into this hike when it started to get dark, and he figures, okay, I should start heading back. Well, that's when he hears the sound of like a deer in pain or agony, and it's crying out like it's hurt. So he goes in the direction of this sound, and there in this field he finds this like injured deer, and its arm is like twisted. So he goes over to this deer to try and help it, when all of a sudden he feels something grab him on the back, and the next thing he knows, he is lifted 20 feet into the air, and he is now flying through the forest as something is carrying him away. He starts fighting with this thing. He doesn't know what has him. Finally, whatever it was drops him to the ground, and he, is hurt, but not badly hurt. He gets up and he starts running as fast as he can to try and make it back to his vehicle. Well, he can hear this thing swooping through the trees, and he said that's when all of a sudden he sees this thing land right in front of him. He said it was, almost if you took a horse and mixed it with a bat, a human, and a few other animals. And he said this thing let out the most terrifying scream that he had ever heard. And he said that's when it took off into the air again, and he took his chance to run to the vehicle. Well, as he gets close to his car, he said this thing, was just following him, swooping down, trying to pick him up. And finally, he makes it to his car. He gets inside, and he thinks, okay, everything's good now. Like, I'm safe. I need to get out of here. He starts his car up, and he starts driving down the highway. As he's driving down the highway, all of a sudden, from the sky, this big, huge deer falls onto the hood of his vehicle, and he almost swerves off the road and crashes. But he just continues on driving. This thing falls off to the side, and he makes it out of the forest. And still to this day, every time he sees a deer, he is terrified.
Wait until you hear this story, guys. I think it pairs really nicely with the one I just told before this one. It feels like another divine intervention to me. So this person gets into a car accident. This was over 10 years ago. And they were hit by another vehicle, and it was hit in such a way that it made them lose complete control. Their car went into a full spin out on the highway. So they T-boned this Jersey wall, and they hit it with enough force to smash up their car almost completely and also crack 2 of the walls. And then if that's not bad enough, they then bounce off of those walls into an off-ramp area where their driver's side was facing oncoming traffic. Their adrenaline's pumping, their heart is racing, and they are about to just exhale and assess the situation and kind of figure out what the heck just happened, when all of a sudden they hear a voice. I have so many chills when I heard this. So very calmly but matter-of-factly, this voice says, "Hey kid, when I start counting, you have 8 seconds to move your car, or you are going to be hit by an 18-wheeler. Do you understand? 8, 7, 6. So without even thinking, they threw their car into drive, and miraculously, despite it being completely smashed up, they were able to get it off of the road. And as the countdown got to 1, the 18-wheeler blew right by in the exact spot that his car had landed from the crash. When the cops and the paramedics arrived at the scene, they assessed it and said that this person should have not made it. They walked out of there with a few bruises and scratches and needed a root canal a couple days later. So they're doubting themselves, saying they wonder if it was just that they imagined it. But I don't know. To me, it sounds like help from the other side. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments if anything similar ever happened to you. Do you believe that somebody from the other side or an angel or something helped you in a really hard situation? Because I don't think that that person was alone on that highway. I can't wait to see what you guys say in the comments. This is a space where people share their awesome, crazy, creepy, spooky, unbelievable stories. Stories of all kinds, not just the creepy ones. Like this one wasn't quite as creepy as others. But if you are new here and you want to join us for all of the weird, unexplained, and paranormal, you gotta follow for more creepy story time.
For a price, I can take your guilt, but what I do with it is my business. In my gentlest voice, I said go over it with me one more time, because today's client was an 11-year-old boy. He said it happened a year ago. We were on our way to the movies, and we were only going because I begged my mom to take me, but a man ran through a red light, and he couldn't finish, but, you know, I knew enough. So slowly, I took his hand in mine, and a sob hitched in his throat when I had him close his eyes. Then I began the treatment. I could see it all, feel it all, the twisted metal and gasoline, the screeching tires, and a child begging his mama to wake up. And guilt, like fathomless and unceasing. The blackness of his soul just poured into me, filled my stomach and shriveled my veins. I mean, it was electric, sickening, soul-shattering, but I drank it all down. His father paid well, but honestly, seeing the smile bloom across his face was the real reward. You know, another satisfied customer. I mean, my own father hated me for my gift. He said that I was a freak and said the world would be a better place without people like me. For years, he tried to make me normal, mainly with his fists. So at 16, I left home and never looked back. And in the years following that, I have absorbed the guilt of thousands, like from soldiers, CEOs. I mean, business never stops booming. Anyways, I was about to leave the office for the day when my secretary stopped me. She said, "Ma'am, are you all right?" She could see that I was pale and the dark circles under my eyes never really faded. So I just joked, fit as a fiddle, but yeah, no, she still looked worried. She said, "Ma'am, the guilt that you take from the clients, where does it all go?" And I swallowed the bile that had rose in the back of my throat and just simply smiled because she wouldn't like the answer. And the drive up to the house was surreal. I mean, same driveway, same trees, but the gray-haired man standing by the door looked different than I remembered. And he said, "What do you want?" "Hi, Dad." And then once he recognized me, that suspicion on his face just soured into hate. And he said, "After all these years, what are you doing here? What makes you think you're welcome here?" Unrepentant. He hadn't changed a bit. So I said, "I actually wanted to give you something, you know, for old time's sake." He said, "I don't want it. You're no daughter of mine." He wanted to slam the door in my face, but I was faster. So I grabbed him, pulled his face just inches from my own, and let it all out. A putrid black tar and a guilt of 1,000 strangers flowed from my mouth and down his throat. All these years of bitching have led to this one great purge. And when it was done, he collapsed to the floor, finally feeling all of the guilt that he never felt for me. And I experienced a relief I have never felt before. And I was grinning ear to ear as I laid the pistol down at his feet.
We live on a military base that's apparently haunted, and my kids keep seeing a little girl in their room. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time. Fright Night Files. This ghost photo is unsettling. So this takes place in Alaska. This photo was sent to me. It basically, the story goes like this, that the aunt used to live in Alaska in military housing. They had 2 kids. The kids just started saying like, hey, there's a little girl in our room. And immediately the mom's like, what do you mean? What do you mean a little girl? Like, what's this little girl doing? And they're like, oh, she just like hangs out in the doorway, or she sits on the floor and she stares at us. And she thought, wait, okay, this has to be like an imaginary friend. She thought the older one like told the younger one like, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this imaginary friend. But even when questioned separately, they would say the same thing. They described the same girl, the way she looked, what she did, all of the things. Like I said, this was 10 years ago. So one night the mom's taking pictures of the kids' room, like taking pictures of the kids, like being cute and stuff. And then she gets this image, and immediately she's like, wait a minute, what is that? Who is that? Is that the little girl? Okay, so here's the photo. I am covering this little kid's face because there's no need for you all to see that face. But you can see finger, she's holding the camera. A lot of people are concerned about what this may be from what I've been told. And it kind of looks like maybe an arm of like a doll or something. But look over there. Like, look in front of the window. What's that? Okay, and is it a little girl like leaned that way? Is she facing forward? Hang on, we're going to zoom in. What's going on here? What is this? Yeah, what is that? Who is that? Who is that? She's completely see-through. I can't decide if she's facing the wall or facing us. I don't know. The hair kind of makes me think she's facing that way, and this little girl is looking at her, but she only had 2 kids, so... And not only that, she's got the photo, like she's taking a photo of the camera with the image on the camera. So it's not like she uploaded it to something and altered it or whatever, which is what makes it really convincing. And also the toys in the kids' room would go off on their own with no batteries, the lights off and on, all of the things. So now let's look at this photo. I need to know what you think. Like, I need to know. I know that all military bases are pretty much haunted. That's just kind of a given. So I'm not surprised by that, but I am kind of surprised of how clear this is. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on it. Let me know in the comments. Ghost photos show up everywhere, but a Toys R Us, that's a new one for me. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time. Fright Night Files. Someone sent me this photo. This is supposedly in an attic of a Toys R Us, which I have never seen an attic look like this at a department store. I feel like someone's lying about where the photo was taken. I don't know. I'm going to show you the ghost photo. Some people say there's 2. Some say there's 1. I'm only going to point out 1. I'm going to see if you can find the second one or what people are saying is the second one. Okay, I think this is the best place for me to be so that you can see where both ghosts are supposed to be. Now, the first one you can see is like right beneath me. Like right here. You can see what appears to be maybe a little girl or a little boy, maybe like a sailor suit of some sort. Now, a lot of people are crying pareidolia that there's nothing there at all, but clearly I see someone sitting like this, looking towards the camera. Well, they're completely sideways. You know what I mean? They're sitting on that little bench. Now, I'm going to get out of the way so that you can look for the other one, and then I want you to comment where you think the other one is, or you can even like screenshot it, circle it, show us in the comments where you think it is, and if you think it's actually 2 ghosts or just 1, or if you think this is even a ghost at all. I'm so interested to hear what you all think. And don't you think this kind of looks like an odd attic for a Toys R Us? So I don't know if I believe that either. Okay, I've moved now and I am completely out of the way of where the second ghost is supposed to be hiding. So I want you to let me know. Can you find it? Do you see it? Do you think there's any ghost at all? Let me know in the comments.
You're going to be so creeped out by this. I found this story on TikTok from a girl. We'll tag her. This story is why Olivia will never live with a roommate again. She has a video that she's shown to 4 people, and 2 of them cried when they saw it. Oh, okay. One of them left her apartment without saying anything and texted her an hour later asking her to never show it to them or to send it to them again. The 4th one watched it 3 times and then told her to delete it and never speak about it again. Okay. Curiosity peaked? Yeah, it is. She hasn't deleted it. She doesn't know why, but she also hasn't shown it to anyone else. It's about her roommate who she calls Danny. So Olivia and Danny had been living together for about 8 months when it started. They were getting along fine. They split everything evenly and they didn't have any real issues. But Danny worked early shifts. She was usually asleep by 10 and Olivia was the night owl. It's relevant because that means that Olivia is always awake. The first night Olivia heard Danny get up, she thought Danny was going to the bathroom. It was around 2 a.m. She heard her door open and heard her in the hallway, and then it went quiet. She then got up to check because the quiet felt weird. Olivia found Danny standing in the kitchen, facing the wall with both palms flat against it. Olivia said her name, and she didn't respond. Olivia touched her shoulder, and she turned around, walked back to her room, and went back to bed. Olivia looked it up, read everything that she could. Obviously, she's realizing Danny is a sleepwalker, so she reads that you should never startle a sleepwalker, and that it was usually harmless. The next morning, Olivia mentions it to Danny over coffee, and she has zero memory of it and seems embarrassed. So Olivia drops it, doesn't bring it up again, but it keeps happening every few nights. Ugh. Olivia hears Danny's door and then finds Danny somewhere in the apartment, standing in the hallway, maybe sitting in the kitchen. Once she was just standing in the middle of the living room with her head tilted back slightly, like she was looking at the ceiling.
That's really creepy.
So Olivia would always just guide her back to bed, and Danny would never remember any of it. But after about 2 weeks of this, Olivia started filming it, partly because she just thought it was wild and wanted to show Danny, and partly because she was starting to lose sleep over it. And some part of her kind of just wanted documentation. The first couple videos were just what she thought she'd been seeing. Her standing somewhere, and then Olivia guiding Danny back to bed. Weird, but nothing that made her feel sick. The third video, Olivia hears Danny get up around 3 a.m. Olivia grabs her phone before she even gets out of bed, turns on her flashlight. Danny's in the hallway.
Okay.
Which was normal by then, but she was walking wrong.
What do you mean?
Danny's a small person, light on her feet, moves kind of quickly in her normal life, but what was in the hallway was moving slowly. Each step was deliberate in the way that Olivia felt like something else was moving Danny's legs.
Ew, I hate that.
And was having to think about it. Her arms were slightly away from her body and her head was down.
Oh. Ew.
Olivia stood in the doorway and kept filming because she was frozen more than anything else. She was just really weirded out by this. Danny walks to the end of the hallway, stops, turns around, and she had never turned around before. So this was really weird. She's just walking down the hallway, stops, flips around. Danny stood there facing Olivia for a second, raised her head from looking down, looked directly into the camera, not in Olivia's direction, but directly at the camera.
Oh my God.
And she's very specific in saying it wasn't like Danny was looking at the general vicinity where the light was, like she was looking directly into the camera lens.
Ew.
Olivia said the expression on Danny's face was not an expression she had ever seen Danny make before.
Oh my God.
And the entire time Olivia knew her, it wasn't blank the way that sleepwalkers look in movies. It was focused, patient, like whatever was making Danny walk, whatever was making Danny be awake, was waiting for Olivia to come out of her room and was glad she finally did. They stood there looking at each other for what was 11 seconds, but felt like much longer. Then Danny smiled.
No.
And Olivia shut her bedroom door.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And locked it. She sat against it on the floor until the sun came up. But the story doesn't end there.
Oh my God.
I had this experience when I was younger, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm from England, and I was 16 years old at the time, and this is something that I think about every single day. It still messes with me, and I just need to know if somebody else has a similar experience that has an explanation. This has genuinely haunted me for the last 10 years. So when I was 16, I took a couple of my friends, and we went to Pendle Hill, and that's where I met a woman. I remember every detail about her, even to this day, very clearly. She introduced herself as Mary Laval, and she said that she was originally from New Orleans, which immediately felt strange because she looked like she was from a completely different time period, like the way she dressed, the way she stared at people, right down to the way that she spoke, and being near her felt heavy. At one point while we were talking, she reached down and pulled out a little bag that she had filled with herbs, and with it was like a little thing. It was like a little figure, and it looked like a little person. She handed him to me, and then she looked directly at me and she said, "The devil will be gone from you now, hopefully, and you should be able to return back to normal now." I remember feeling completely frozen when she said those words because I had no idea what the heck she was talking about. And then she did some kind of blessing over my head and my hands, whatever that was. After that, she put a necklace around my neck, and the pendant was dark red, like there was a dark liquid in it. You could probably guess what I'm referring to. And she told me to go high up and bury it, but where I could still see the sea. For some reason, I actually listened to her, and I went and I buried this thing, and ever since that point, I've had nightmares, like all the time, and they're always the same. I'm always like placed in New Orleans, but it's not modern day. It's like back in the 1900s almost. In every single dream, I'm searching for somebody, and I never see their full face. It's always a little bit blurry, but I'm always following them around, trying to catch up to them through buildings and whatnot. And then they always go to this house, and they enter it, and my dream always cuts off before I can follow them into this house. The worst part of this is there's also something following me in my dreams. In every dream, I feel like it's getting closer and closer. I can never see what it is, but I can feel the presence getting closer. And then there's people in my dreams always giving me warnings, like, you need to fight your way out, you need to figure everything out. And then there's the sea. In every single dream, the sea is getting higher and higher, and it's going through the streets, and people are saying that it's rising so the history disappears. I genuinely have not slept properly in years because of these dreams. So if anybody has an explanation for this, please fill me in or let me know what happened that day.
You know that feeling when you're home alone and your mind starts to play tricks on you and you swear that you can hear noises coming from every part of your house? Well, this story is kind of like that, except there might have actually been something there. Emphasis on the something. This story isn't my own, it's my mother's. She's told it hundreds of times over the years to anyone willing to listen because whatever happened to her that day shook her to her core. It happened sometime in the 1980s when my mom was still a teenager. One sunny morning, she was home alone. Her parents were out running errands, and her sister had gone out too, leaving the house completely empty except for herself. She was upstairs taking a shower when she heard the front door downstairs open and close. At first, she thought nothing of it. She assumed that one of her parents or her sister had come home. After her shower, she wrapped herself in a towel and walked into her bedroom beside the bathroom to get dressed. She turned on her radio and stood in front of the mirror hanging on the back of her bedroom door, which was slightly cracked open. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she noticed something strange. On the wall beside the door, a shadow slowly began to grow, as if someone was approaching her room from the hallway, their silhouette cast through the narrow opening in the door. Startled, my mom quickly shoved the door closed, but something on the other side pushed back. For a moment, there was a struggle against the door. Panicking, she yelled out that she wasn't dressed. Immediately, the pressure stopped. She locked the door, turned off her radio, and listened. She called out for her dad, then for her mom, then for her sister. Nothing. The house was completely still. Slowly, she opened the bedroom door again and called out one more time. Hello? That's when she heard it. The slow, deliberate sound of a man's dress shoes pacing across the ceramic tiles downstairs. Back and forth, back and forth. Terrified, my mom slammed the door shut and ran to the landline phone in her room. She called her best friend, who immediately told her to hang up and call 911. So she did. After she told the dispatcher that someone had broken into the house, police cars came racing down the street. My mom leaned out her bedroom window, screaming to get the officers' attention. The police tried the front door, but it was locked. The officers told her she needed to come downstairs and open it. If she wasn't at the door within 10 seconds, they would break it down. Gathering every ounce of courage she had, my mom ran out of her bedroom, down the stairs, through the hallway, where she heard the footsteps only moments before and unlocked the front door. A dozen officers rushed inside and searched the entire house from top to bottom. Every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. But they found nothing. No broken windows, no unlocked doors, no sign that anyone had entered or left the house at all. And that was only one experience in that house. My grandparents lived there until 2 years ago, and nearly everyone in my family experienced something they still cannot explain. I personally witnessed a full-bodied apparition in the basement and heard footsteps moving across the main floor when nobody else was home. My Nana heard voices and loud crashing noises only to find everything exactly where it should have been. Objects would randomly fall or get knocked over by unseen forces, and the motion detector on the main floor would regularly trigger in the middle of the night while everyone was asleep upstairs. To this day, we believe multiple spirits inhabit that house. Sometimes I wonder if the people living there now have experienced anything strange too.
So a couple of days ago, I posted a video of how I hired these two Etsy witches to conduct 2 spells for me, one for money and one for success. And some of you guys in the comments were inquiring about love spells, which we need to talk about. Because when it comes to those types of spells and those types of emotions, you definitely don't want to fuck with that. Here's a cautionary tale. So I have a podcast called Hollywood Paranormal Podcast, and I've interviewed a slew of people, especially a ton of practitioners, some witches, others brujas, santeras, and even mambos and other priestesses. And there was a story from one of those individuals that I interviewed. It was actually a bruja who is based out of Los Angeles. And when I was interviewing her, I asked her, what was the craziest spell you've ever conducted that had the most unexpected or the most intense outcome? And she said it was a love spell that she conducted for a client who was very, very persistent on having the spell done. And it was because she was in love with a man who was already married and she wanted this man so badly. This woman would come to the botanica begging for this spell work. And, at first she was like, I think you should really think about this. But the woman was very persistent, even offering her thousands of dollars. So she told the woman, look, I'm going to do this for you. I'm not going to do it for you for thousands of dollars. I'm going to do it for, the general price that I do my spell work. And I'm just telling you here and now, I'm going to warn you for the last time, this is not going to be the outcome that you want, because when you get this man, you get everything of him. You're going to get all of him. And she didn't care. She wanted the spell and she wanted the man. So she conducted the spell. A month later, the girl got the man. The man ended up leaving his wife, ended up moving in with this woman, ended up getting his love and attention, ended up getting everything, including his wife. Yeah, the wife wouldn't leave him alone. Went as far as stalking the woman, stalking her at her job, to the point where the woman had to get a restraining order against her. It got pretty intense. So then the woman came back to the bruja in her botanica. She was like, hey, can we readjust the spell a bit? Like, can we tailor it? Which the woman was told no. I mean, what's done is done. You wanted him, you got him. You got everything. You technically got all of him. Even all of his grievances. So yeah, watch out what you wish for, and also watch out what your intentions are set for, because those things come with such a great cost.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. The story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. When I was 16 years old, my school organized a month-long conservation trip to Borneo in Southeast Asia. During our time there, we spent weeks moving from camp to camp, helping with environmental work in remote areas, jungles, villages, churches, youth centers, places completely isolated from everything that was familiar to me. I remember the first time I heard the rules. It was almost as soon as I stepped off the plane, and the locals would repeat them to us. They were always very serious about them. My original thoughts and feelings of them being silly superstitions quickly turned into doubt. We were warned by them about the same things. Never whistle after dark, never sing at night, never call out into the jungle for no reason, because they would say something might answer you. Now, I'm not particularly religious, but I've always believed that there are things in this world that we don't understand and we can't explain. So even though some of the other kids laughed it off, I made sure to follow every rule exactly as they had laid them out to me. In a country where the belief in spirits and demons is taken very seriously, I didn't want to be the person to overstep. I clearly had no idea what I could potentially be running into, and I really didn't want to find out. Now, during our trips to the first few camps, nothing strange happened. We did what we were there to do and moved on without any hiccups. The 8th camp, though, I still think about that camp constantly. From the moment our bus pulled up into the area, I knew it was different. I can't really explain how I knew, I just did. It felt different, heavy with dread. And I don't know why I felt that way. I had never been there before, knew no history of the camp, but somehow my body still reacted to something that my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The camp was set up on old church grounds far away from the nearest town. The building we stayed in was a long single-story structure with narrow hallways and dim yellow lights that barely worked. Everything felt damp from the humidity, and at night, the jungle around us sounded alive. Insects screamed in the trees, branches creaking and swaying in the darkness, things moving that you couldn't quite catch with your eye. Inside the building, there were 5 rooms lined along one corridor, with the bathrooms all the way at the other end. My room was the very first one beside the entrance. Each room had thin curtains hanging in the doorway in place of a proper door, and had 4 mattresses laid across the floor side by side, with one old ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead. My mattress was the one furthest from the entrance, and when I would lay down on it, if I looked slightly to the left, I could see directly through the curtain and into the hallway. The first night anywhere felt new and uneasy, but nothing ever really happened, and the rest of the time at a camp would go on as normal, but the second night at this one, well, this night, all of us went to bed at around 10 p.m. after a long day at work. And just as every other story starts, I woke up, unknowing the time, and only that it had to be sometime in the middle of the night because it was completely pitch black outside. There was nothing to comfort me, no voices, no shuffling of movement, just the slow ceiling fan creaking above us, not really doing much other than offering a hum of a distraction. When trying to gather my thoughts, I noted that I had probably woken up because I was cold, which I then quickly realized made no sense because Borneo is unbelievably humid, even at night. But I remember feeling freezing cold, almost like when a sickness is slowly creeping up on you. I reached beside me to grab my hoodie and pulled it over my head, and that's when I noticed the curtain that hung as a door was moving. The ceiling fan was causing it to sway back and forth slightly, opening just enough every few seconds to reveal the hallway outside. I'm not sure why, but I found myself in sort of a trance watching the movement. I couldn't stop staring at the flapping curtain and the glimpse of the empty hallway on the other side. Something about the hallway felt different, not the same, wrong, almost. And as I was staring at it, noticing that feeling, someone walked past. A girl. She was short. She had long black hair hanging all the way down to her hips. Her head tilted slightly downward, so I couldn't fully see her face, and the way she walked made me instantly uneasy. One step at a time, smooth. Too smooth. Almost like she was gliding. All of a sudden, my stomach flipped, and I felt that crazy feeling inside of me spike. My body was on high alert, and I was terrified. What scared me most wasn't even how she looked, or her gliding walk, or that I knew she wasn't supposed to be there. It was the direction she was going. She was walking away from the rooms, toward the entrance, toward outside, but there was nowhere else to go. Beyond our room was the front door, and beyond that, there was only complete darkness and jungle. No bathrooms, no other rooms, nothing. And I remember laying there trying to convince myself that it was just another girl from camp. Maybe someone couldn't sleep and was awake like I was. Maybe someone went outside and she was following them, but deep down I knew that wasn't right. Simply because of that walk. She didn't make a single noise. No footsteps, no rustling, no padding feet, nothing. Just that slow, creepy movement past the curtain, and then she was gone. I laid there on that mattress, staring at the doorway, listening for the sound of the front door to open and close so that I could continue trying to explain the entire night to myself, but I never heard it. There were no footsteps outside. There were no voices, nothing. I ended up falling asleep again, and the next morning I woke up immediately thinking about what I had seen. At breakfast, I tried casually asking everyone questions. Did anyone wake up last night? Did someone go outside? Does anybody sleepwalk? And every single person said no. Nobody had left the room. Nobody had been awake. And while I was explaining what I saw, one of my roommates, Bella, suddenly went completely pale. I remember she just stared at me for a second before quietly saying, "I didn't want to tell anyone this." She then began to explain that the night before, she woke up because she felt someone grabbing her ankles. She felt herself being physically pulled down the mattress. At first, she thought one of us was messing with her, so she sat up, ready to yell at someone, but everyone else in the room was completely sound asleep. The entire mood at camp changed that morning. Even the teachers seemed uncomfortable there. We left the next day and never stayed another night on those church grounds.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
So it turns out you can be on your way home minding your business and still somehow attract some sort of demonic presence to literally follow you home. It's terrifying. This story was submitted by one of you guys. I'm going to go ahead and tell the story in the first person, but it did not happen to me. When I was about 8 to 9 years old, I was in the car with my grandmother driving to my uncle's house. My grandma and I were talking in the car when we started to talk about how when I was about 3 years old, I used to call my grandmother Mecca. She said that one day when she was at the grocery store, she had this older lady go up to her and ask why I called her Mecca. My grandmother told the lady that she didn't know why I called her Mecca, that I just have always had for some reason. The older lady then told my grandmother that I had a gift, that I had a spiritual gift. At the time, that was just like a strange little story, and the drive just continued. As we continued to drive down the road, we passed a cemetery where my great-grandmother Kate was buried. So my grandmother goes to me and says, "Look, that's where your great-grandmother is buried." And she has a very large headstone that's very visible from the road. So I was looking at this headstone, I see this woman standing right next to the grave, but she was completely dressed in white.
I couldn't see her face, but I could see that she had long dark hair, pale skin, and she was just standing there. I asked my grandmother who she was, but she said, "What woman? There's no one there." But I kept seeing her. She was just standing there looking directly at me. I looked over to tell my grandmother that the woman was in fact standing there, but the second it took me to turn my head and then turn back around to show her, the woman was no longer standing there. My phone is reheating for some reason. Every time I talk about these D-word type stories, my phone reheats. I'm going to try to just read the email and get through this. So after she told her grandmother the woman's no longer there, they continued to drive and they end up arriving to the uncle's house. That night we arrived to my uncle's house and I was upstairs on the balcony in the guest room when I looked down and I saw her, that same woman, still dressed in white, just standing there staring at me. Something in me told me to go inside, so I did. A little later, everything in the house changed. I went downstairs and my grandmother was panicking. She says that there was a cross that was above the fireplace that had been flipped upside down. My uncle would never have done that. He's extremely religious. Then more things started to happen. My grandmother started to pray and my uncle kept yelling at this thing to leave them alone, that whatever it was, that it wasn't welcome in the house. And then more and more crosses that he had around the house kept being flipped upside down. The house felt different, cold, heavy, like something didn't want to leave. And at one point, the whole house even felt like it was shaking. Then there was screaming and then it just randomly stopped. Everything went completely silent. I don't know what that woman was. I don't know what happened that night, but I know exactly what I saw. And even now, my grandmother tries to tell me that that never ever happened, that I dreamt it, but I know I didn't. Like, I know I was there. I saw her. So yeah, what do you guys think? I definitely feel like she saw something for whatever reason. Maybe when she was driving past the cemetery, since she's extremely sensitive, these things, these beings will see her as light and maybe it just attached itself to her. So when she went to her uncle's house, it kind of like went insane because it had all the religious artifacts and it had the crosses and maybe it just like pissed it off. But I 100% believe it. What do you guys think?
Does anyone else remember Run the Gauntlet? Run the Gauntlet is one of the most disturbing internet challenges to ever exist. The basis of this so-called challenge was to watch a series of videos in order all the way through without looking away. But the videos are some of the most disgusting and vile shock content on the internet. There are 20 levels in total. Starting at level 1, or what was considered the beginner level, you could expect to see a woman breaking her arm during an arm wrestling match, a video of a man accidentally stabbing himself after a magic trick gone wrong, which has since been debunked, and even a clip from Jackass where Johnny Knoxville receives dozens of paper cuts in the webs of his hands and feet. It doesn't seem like much, but it is called the beginner level for a reason, and from there you would work your way up to the easy level, then medium, hard, and ending with the last level, which is called insane. And the insane level includes horrific animal cruelty, hostage type videos, and more. When you enter the site, you will receive a warning that you must be of legal age to watch the content and that you'll be unable to skip to the next video until you've watched the one you're currently on until the end. There's also no way to pause or stop a video once it's started. Millions of people have been traumatized by this site and it's still in existence today. Now, if you're like me and are morbid curious but don't want to scar yourself for the rest of your life, I can do a video breaking down what each level entails to the best of my ability on social media. So if that's something you'd tune in for, drop me a comment to let me know and follow.
Imagine you're in a car with people you love and trust, never once thinking that they would cause you any harm, when all of a sudden the driver floors the gas pedal, flying through a residential street going almost 100 miles per hour. And before anyone can react, the car slams straight into a brick building so hard that the car quite literally splits in two. And just like that, 2 people are gone. That's what happened to Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan. And the person who was driving the car is 17-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla. Now, at first, you might hear about this case and think, okay, clearly this was a terrible, terrible accident. She was clearly not in control. Maybe she blacked out or something. But the more you look into it and the deeper you go, the harder it is to realize that this is not something that came out of nowhere. Mackenzie and Dominic had actually been in a relationship for a very long time now, but throughout the years, people started saying that their relationship became very toxic. It was no longer about young love and more like intense attachment. There are countless stories of her being physical with him, being very controlling, not wanting him to act a certain way. And there's one moment, weeks before the crash, that really stands out. Her and Dom were in the car together that day, and Mackenzie was driving. But something happened that turned into an argument, and for some reason it got so heated that Dom started feeling really unsafe, and he actually called his mom to come and pick him up in the middle of the highway. And while he's on the phone with his mom, she can hear Mackenzie in the background yelling, "I'm going to wreck this car right now." Now at that time, she didn't do anything. Things calmed down, Dom got picked up, the day ended perfectly fine. But that specific moment didn't just disappear, because 2 weeks later, they are all back into that same car again. It's July 31st, 2022, at around 4 or 5ish in the morning, and after getting ready to leave a friend's house, Dominic hops in the passenger seat of Mackenzie's car, Mackenzie gets in the driver's seat, and their friend Davion gets in the back seat. Now, somewhere during that drive home, something changes. We don't know if one of them said something, maybe they started arguing again, maybe Dom tried to end the relationship for real this time, we don't know. But for whatever reason, Mackenzie started speeding the car up faster and faster and faster. And I don't mean going a little over the speed limit, I mean she is going almost 100 miles per hour on a residential road. And within a matter of literal seconds, the car flashes down the street, and all you hear are the terrifying sounds of the car smashing straight into a brick building that was right in front of them. The crash was so violent that the car physically split in two, and when officers arrived to the scene, they called it the worst crash they have ever laid their eyes on. Unfortunately, when they looked inside the car, Dominic and Davion did not survive the impact. It was a catastrophic mess, but to their surprise, Mackenzie was still breathing. And so all the policemen locked in, and they said if there's any good that can come out of this crash, it is to save this girl right here. And that's exactly what they did. They rushed her to the hospital, they performed multiple surgeries on her to save her life, and after doing that, now it was time for police to start asking questions and figuring out how the hell did such a bad car crash happen. Mackenzie started saying that she didn't remember anything that happened, that she just blacked out and that was it. So they brought in a neurologist to maybe figure out, okay, why? But all they said was that she probably just had a medical episode. It's possible that she lost consciousness and her body shut down in that exact moment. But here's why it gets difficult to believe that, because the car itself tells an entirely different story. Every car has something called a black box. It's basically like an event data recorder that tracks every move the car makes. And the data from the car that night showed that the gas pedal was pushed down the entire time. There wasn't a second where Mackenzie lifted her foot off of it. There was no attempt to slow down or stop the car, which if you try and pair that with the idea that she passed out, it doesn't make any sense. A limp passed out person wouldn't have the strength to be able to floor a gas pedal to over 100 miles per hour. And when you also put that next to what happened weeks before when she told Dom that she was going to crash the car during an argument, it starts to feel like less of a coincidence. Then there's how she acted after the crash. Mackenzie stayed in a hospital while recovering for some time, and about 3 months later, apparently her parents allowed her to go to a concert with her friends, and she was posting it all over social media, even making a TikTok where she tells people to search her name up. And people saw that and they started thinking, how do you go from something as tragic as this to acting so normal? Like, I know everyone handles trauma very differently. There is no perfect way to grieve, but when you have a mountain of evidence that points only one way, it makes people question the things you do a whole lot more. Eventually, investigators felt very strongly about their case and they made a decision. They arrested Mackenzie and charged her for the murders of Dominic and Davion. Now, in court, the focus wasn't really too much on what happened, but why. Was it truly unintentional? Her lawyer stated that she doesn't remember anything that happened, that something went physically wrong, and that she lost complete control, and why would she harm herself too if her goal was to kill Dom? But the prosecution pointed to the level of speed and the lack of braking that she did, the erratic steering, going right and then left and right again, smashing into the wall almost as if she was purposely trying to hit Dom's side even more, the gear switching from drive to neutral and then back again, and also her toxic relationship with Dom. And in the end, the judge agreed with the prosecutors, and Mackenzie Shirilla was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But even now, to this day, people are still arguing about this case because there is just one question that never fully goes away. What actually happened in those last few seconds? Was it truly a medical emergency, or was it something that she did purposefully out of anger? We'll never hear Dominic's side. We'll never hear Davion's side. And the only person who could explain anything says that she doesn't remember. But if you were to take just a step back and look at this entire case as a whole,